Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 107 with the Carr brothers. I'm joined here with Jack and Jody.
Hi. Hi,
You
everyone.
all know how are you doing, guys?
Very
Very
great.
good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
What's on the agenda today? What's on the agenda?
Well, it's episode 107, as you mentioned. We have longtime Fredericton court reporter Don MacPherson, over 21 years with the Daily Gleaner. And now he is an independent reporter for the courts of New Brunswick and has his own business called the Fredericton Independent. So we'll have Don on, here in a few minutes, and really looking forward to that. So
Yeah, because there will be a discussion as well about recently switching to a paywall to get news coverage. So we've been used to being able to just click on for free, so to speak. And what do people think of that, and what's the reasoning behind that, and how can you avoid that? I don't think you can, but that'll be an interesting conversation too.
well, and again, and we've over the last last few years, several months, the last few weeks of newsrooms cutting the national, and even provincial newsrooms cutting their newsroom staff. So even more so to have critical local news available, and that's why we're happy that our viewers watch CHCO, New Brunswick's only independent TV channel.
It'd be interesting to hear from Don
Yes.
on the challenges, but also the benefits of moving from a mainstream media over to private and doing local community. And because there would have to be a bonus and a positive and negative to both. So it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about that.
Get that perspective.
That's right. But in the meantime,
So,
Jack,
let's catch up on a
Nora
few
says
things.
she's happy to have you back.
Oh,
Nora
thanks,
said-
Nora.
Yes, she missed you last week.
I appreciate that, Nora. That means a lot.
Yeah. So, anyways,
So it's kind of been a busy week out and about, hasn't it? Lots going on. The Cover Bridge potato chip factory in Heartland burnt tragically, just totally right to the ground. And we were talking a little bit about that before, and I wasn't aware of the comment, but the owner had some things to say today, I guess, which is exciting.
CEO Ryan Albright issued a news release, a statement saying that, of course, the number one thing that he's pleased about is that no one was hurt in the fire. Their staff was like family, about 185 staff, employees. And so no one was hurt, but the good news is that there's plans in the days and weeks ahead to rebuild. And that's the factory part. So he's already working with an interim solution to have the factory, a temporary factory, utilized nearby to be able to keep production going. And then the good thing is the head office and two other warehouses were saved. They were 10 kilometers away. So they had a lot of stock still in those warehouses. So the stores will continue to have storm chips and Cover Bridge
I was a
chips.
little worried about stock because everybody was showing their pictures on Facebook and social media of going out and buying the chips because nobody really knew at that point if they would open again. And now that we know that there's warehouses full of stock,
now
all is good.
have they said anything about how long it's going to take to find out the cause?
No, it's still under investigation by the fire marshal, is what I heard there today. So,
But there was an employee, I think there was an employee interviewed the other night, and they said they did have an issue with the fryer or something.
I wondered.
Yeah.
That
It
would
was
have
a
been
grease
something.
fire or something. So, and it wouldn't take very long for that to go up.
The fact that nobody was hurt, because it could have been.
Yeah, there were 30 employees at the time working. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Now, people want to support the displaced workers. In the meantime, there's some breakfast coming up, I guess. What do you guys know about that?
So I saw it on Facebook, so it must be true.
Must be true.
And some of my colleagues from up in that area, Margaret Johnson and Richard Ames, are sharing, and maybe Richard Bragdon as well, sharing posts about a breakfast this weekend. So if you want to go find that, search Richard or Margaret on Facebook. There's a benefit breakfast on Saturday, I believe, to raise money for the employees to kind of hold them over.
Right.
Help them out a little bit. And
because if they go even being on EI, some of them will have to draw EI. Well, that's still there's still a waiting period.
There's a waiting period, and EI is normally only, like, depending on your region, max you can get is 60% of your salary. So it's pretty hard to live on 60% of your salary. So that's taking place. And since we're plugging breakfasts right now, there's a breakfast this Saturday at the Gary Lions Club for Kayla Carr.
Right.
So we'll want to get out and support that. Kayla's undergoing some treatments there and whatnot. So comes from the good Carr family in Gary, obviously, and so we'll want to get out and support that. Saturday morning.
Would we be related or?
Certainly.
Well, probably.
Well, I always just reminds me of my Nan, Nan Carrina, and I'd say, Nan, are we related to so-and-so Carr down the road that lives by the wherever? Oh, no, she said, no, that's another branch of Carrs. Are we related to? No, that's another branch of Carrs. But
This comes through Kenneth and Midge's.
oh, well then, yes. Well, like Edison said, we're not related to Commodore, the grandfather. But I said, yes, Edison, we are.
Because you've worked on the family tree, haven't you, Jody?
Yeah,
and how many do you have on the tree? About 5,000
branches. They all intertwine quite a lot.
Yeah. Well, you have about 5,000 people on there.
really?
And it goes back to the Loyalist Day. So yes, the rumor is incorrect. We are all
Connected
related
somehow.
somehow. But
yeah,
aren't we all
absolutely.
really though in this
Oh,
world?
in God's world.
And look at ancestry. Have you guys ever thought about doing the ancestry?
Not
DNA?
really. I don't know a whole lot about it.
Our mom, Debbie Johnston.
Yes.
You remember her?
Yes.
I'll let you guys look after that stuff, and I'll just take your word for it.
She did it, but I don't know. It might be interesting to do. We should. I want to think about doing it, but
Okay.
You go ahead and
Let
me
us know how
that
you
works
make out.
okay.
Yeah.
But back about the
yes.
the fundraising breakfasts is your current MLA Jeff and Maryland-Sunbury, Jode, previous MLA myself. That's a big part of the duties, I guess, is being out there to the communities, not only to attend fundraising events, but when there are tragic experiences, things that take place in the riding or even through the provinces, the communities really gather together. But a lot of times it takes those community leaders to rally and to put those things on. But you've both covered, your fair share of community events.
Oh yeah.
To raise money for tragic
You've
situations.
hosted it.
We've all hosted
Actually, yeah.
events,
Expose.
but I see more and more now the community leaders, as in the Lions clubs and the rec centers, really pulling groups of people together when it comes time for fundraisers like that, and then the whole community comes. So it just seems more and more now that they're just taking it on and they're just naturally doing it. And Tracy, if there's a community event for a fundraiser like that, there's an ad on Facebook with all the ingredients they need for breakfast, and people are just donating food, and in no time, everything's covered.
Chipping in.
It many hands make light work, as they say. So that's it's good. But yeah, we do go to a lot of those, and it's just when people are at those events, they're happy to help, and they're cheery, and they're in a good mood, and it's just it's a good place to be. It's a good environment to be in. So I look forward to that.
Well, another thing in the past week is Brian Mulroney, our Canada's 18th Prime Minister, passed away. He was 84. And Jode, you posted a couple of, I say tweets, but comments about your experiences with Brian Mulroney. Your first election that you were involved and volunteered with was 1993.
I know.
Wouldn't have been cool, I guess, to be a progressive conservative.
Well, at the same time, just on that same day, I was listening to Barbara Mandrell sing Country Wasn't Cool, eh? It kind of made me think of that a little bit, but I was down. I was a little sad. I'm like, why? Well, Brian Mulroney died. Well, why? Because in 1993, when I finished high school, that was my first campaign, and I had to decide, and John Chrétien or Brian Mulroney, but anyways, it's he a lot of remarks about statesmen and the policies and the whatever, and how politics has changed since people like him and other leaders were around. So it's all part of the journey. But yeah, fun days.
So I never got to meet him, obviously. And Joe, do you have?
Yes.
Jack, did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had one of the dinners.
Did he come to caucus when you guys were in caucus together?
Not when I was in caucus. You might have been just cabinet, wasn't it?
Yeah, he came to cabinet under David Allward's cabinet, and he came in, and it just amazing talent, but just that charisma everyone knows. But he could just rattle off these stories and talked about being prime minister and then the cabinet, and I can't even do it justice because but one would leave and he talked about being consensus, and they were all upset, and then when the reporters were outside the door, and they come out and asked him what consensus meant or something. And anyways, he had some smart remark to come back with.
And also, was it Greg Thompson that said, or one of the MPs?
Oh, yeah.
Your friend
Well,
said
I was doing
everyone would be all upset. Get to Ottawa to caucus. I can't wait to tell him a thing or two.
Well, I was doing door-to-door with Greg Thompson, Member of Parliament, Southwest New Brunswick. Well, we were in Gagetown when that was his riding. Well, we went to Bob Corbett's house, who was a former Member of Parliament as well. And Greg and Bob were talking about the good old days with Brian Mulroney, and one of the books were just coming out. And I remember Greg Thompson, who passed away now, but he said, remember, Bob, like we'd go in, we were backbench members of Parliament, and polls were at 6%.
Oh, man.
Everyone hated Brian Mulroney and whatever. We were going to gang up in caucus. We were going to come to
Tell
caucus.
him a thing or two.
We were all upset. We were going to tell him, like, we got to do something here. We're done. We're walking out. We got to do something. Well, anyways, Brian Mulroney and his magic would just pull out the newspapers, start turning the pages, and he'd have something to say about every headline, and then they'd be laughing, and they'd come up with something, and he said by the end of it, we're all rolling in the aisles, just laughing at each other and patting back. And he said, you know, like it was the buffalo going over the cliff or whatever, but he just had that magic to keep his caucus there, you know.
Well, and look at it. He had one of the biggest, if not the biggest, majorities in 1984, and one again in 1988. It's the only time since Sir John A. Macdonald led a PC government won back, or since the earliest time was Sir John A. Macdonald, back-to-back wins.
Yeah.
Well, you have to be able to pull the country together in the party to be able to.
Do you guys remember that summer in high school, though, when I was doing the Jean Chrétien impersonations? And you maybe don't. You probably don't remember, but after high school in that summer, Nan always did. Nan remembered. Yes, I was doing Jean Chrétien impersonations, trying to decide which way I was going to support in the election. And funny though, that election we lost pretty bad. That was my timing. Eh?
Well, you know, it was
you
a good
knew what
time.
it was like to lose.
Well, I knew what I learned in
help.
grade 12 economics was the GST.
Right.
And they thought 7%, big GST, 7%. But when you learn that it was a manufacturer's tax of 13% only on Canadian goods, then it was our Canadian manufacturers were at a disadvantage to imports from outside. So what he did was take it all they take the 13% manufacturers off of Canadian goods and put the 7% on all the goods. So we actually lowered the tax from Canadian manufacturer products. But it got put on the front end, and the cashiers had to collect it. Well, people thought it was a new 7%, but it was always a hidden 13% before. But when I figured that out, I'm like, this is probably a good thing to do.
Progressive.
Yeah, progressive.
Wow. That was quite something. And then, I voted in 1993. I was in Thunder Bay and just started radio and TV broadcasting college. And I didn't know who to vote for, didn't really pay a whole lot of attention. But I knew that Jody was supporting the PC. So I voted. It was a city councillor that ran there, and she didn't win. But of course, we know that. But that's where my vote went to 1993.
Yeah.
And we'd be remiss just a couple minutes. We got Don MacPherson.
That would have been my first election to vote, I think, in '93.
Well, it was our first one. But
Yeah, I suppose, because it was our first one too.
I just turned. I would have just turned 21 then, 22 in '93. So I would have missed the first cycle.
Yeah. 91. The provincial one might have been your first one to be able to vote.
Yeah.
Wore my buttons to university. Crazy.
Well,
Anyway.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
No.
But we'd be remiss. We're going to have Don MacPherson
Yes.
coming on from the Daily Gleaner here in a few minutes, but we'd be
But
remiss.
formerly the Daily Gleaner.
Exactly, formerly of the Daily Gleaner. So he's with the Fredericton Independent.
Yeah.
We'd be remiss, though, not to mention a huge void from especially being on CHCO-TV based in Charlotte County. Passing away just a few days ago was Gifford Cook. He was almost 86, a co-founder of Cook Agriculture. Was founded in 1994 with Glenn and Mike, and now worldwide close to 13,000 employees. And so huge void. He was an icon in the community, and a lot of sentiments throughout social media and things like that about all the positive impacts that he contributed.
And to bring that up to one of, what is it, New Brunswick's largest, or one of the largest?
Well, one of the largest. It'd be one of the largest companies in New Brunswick.
Yeah.
And I think it's the largest privately owned seafood company in the world.
Yeah.
At 12, close to 13,000 employees. So our hearts and thoughts and prayers go to Charlotte County and
you're good friends
Glenn and
with,
Mike
you're
and
good friends with
Debbie as well. Yeah. The Cook family is a huge supporter of the Village of Hope. Men's and Women's Addiction Center in Estonia and in Tracy, and many other organizations throughout New Brunswick and the world that they support. And so our thoughts and prayers go to them and all the employees worldwide. So I'd like to make that mention.
Good job. Thanks.
Okay, well, let's take a little break, guys, and just a couple minutes, and then we'll get Don MacPherson on, and we'll have some more of your comments here on the Carr Brothers Show. Looking forward to it.
Yes. See you in a few.
And hello, welcome back to the Carr Brothers Show, episode 107. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jody, the third of the three Carr Brothers. Welcome to our Carr Brothers Live, CHCO, and Facebook Live. We have a special guest here tonight. Jack?
Yes, we do. It's Don MacPherson. He's New Brunswick and Fredericton court reporter for over 20 years with the Daily Gleaner, and now with the Fredericton Independent, an independent court reporter in New Brunswick. So we're very happy to have you here, Don.
Thanks for having me on.
And tell us about the Fredericton Independent. How did that come about?
Well, in November of 2022, I got a call from management at Brunswick News saying they were offering another round of voluntary buyouts to some senior members of the news team at the Gleaner. And to my surprise, I was one of them. And my initial reaction was, well, I'm only 51, I'm not ready to retire. So, you know, I told the editor-in-chief, you don't have to worry about me. And he didn't want me to take it. He was directed to present the offer. And also at that time, Bruce Hallahan was given an offer, as was Tim Jakes, who was a Campbellton reporter with Brunswick News, who had just was moving to Fredericton to join the Gleaner staff. And but then I found out that how small the staff was going to become, which is not uncommon in any newsroom these days, unfortunately. And I just decided, if I'm only one of two, one of only one or two reporters left, I'll find that frustrating. I'll be torn in a lot of directions and won't get to sort of focus on the stories that I've had the privilege to do over the previous 2 decades. So I decided to take the buyout. And I'd had the idea for something like the Fredericton Independent in the back of my head for a while. And so, but I took the buyout and then took about a month off. I worked until the end of December 2022. And then at the end of January, I launched the Independent. I had the financial support of the buyout. I didn't need to do anything in terms of revenue right away. And I was able to just build the brand over the course of 2023. And then, so early this year, I was like, okay, time to get, now I need to
you
get
pay the
paid.
bills.
I have
yes.
to earn a
the
living
bills.
with this.
That's right.
And one of the reasons I had chosen Substack as a platform to publish on is that they have a very simple system. It's basically turnkey, and I could just flick a switch, set the rates that subscription rates that I wanted to do. But it also, you can have free subscribers, and I have lots of them.
Yeah.
And you can still put stories out to everyone for free. And then some stories would be paid content. And there's been solid support. Obviously, not everybody who was signed up for a free subscription switched over, very much a minority, but that's standard with that sort of venture. Lots of people, lots of journalists use Substack, and they usually see 10 to 15% of people make the switch to paid, and that's about what I've seen. And it looks like it might be, it'll be viable as an income. I'm quite encouraged for the first month and a half, and I'm getting new paid subscribers every day. So it's been encouraging.
That's cool.
It's also been an education because now I have to be a businessman.
Right.
And I just want to write.
Right.
But it's so I'm learning as I go, but it's going well, and I'm enjoying getting to make all the decisions about what I'm doing every day.
And that's
what you.
what I was thinking before. It is liberating, and
Oh,
it's you have that flexibility to independently write what you want to write, and what your readers want to hear or want to read, your followers, and that independence is huge.
Or discover it as I go, like based on the reactions. I have a lot of readers would like to see more news. They want to see city council reports and things like that. And absolutely, I wish I could do that, but I'm only one person.
Right.
And honestly, what I'm known for is court reporting.
Yeah.
That's where my expertise lies. I do other stories as well, but when it comes to city council, over 25 years, I think I covered 2.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm just not as well versed in those issues. And
You could do it if you had to, but
and it's a deep dive. It could be. The other thing I tell people is that I want to do other stories, and sometimes I make time for it.
seen some, yeah.
But if I can go to court for 2 hours and walk out with 4 stories, I have to maximize my time.
Right,
in
and it's
terms
all
of
there
that.
in one.
But if the independent keeps growing, if the subscription base keeps growing, maybe I'll be able to bring someone else in to add another voice. I don't know. It's sort of I'm of two minds of that. I don't really want to be someone's boss and spend time editing copy, but at the same time, I do love local news. I want it to be as robust as possible.
Right.
But we'll just see how it goes and how it evolves. So.
And there's really not a lot of court kind of news. I mean, I guess there's not really a whole lot of local news to begin with anymore.
Well, I mean, the staff at the Daily Gleaner has shrunk considerably, and I'm not including the legislature bureau with that.
Yeah,
I mean, they're based in Fredericton for the most part, but that's provincial news. And they've got 2 people at the Gleaner right now, and they're doing a great job with I mean, there are only 2 people, and but council's getting covered. They cover some larger court stories. But I was the only person, when I was at the Gleaner, I was the only one going to court almost every day.
Anyway.
And it is a very specialized field. You have to develop the contacts, develop the knowledge and things like that, and know where to look for the stories. So, and it's not a criticism of anyone else.
No,
it's just
it's the time.
do it for 20 years, you're
what
going
you know,
to
yeah.
pick
You
up
need
a
to
few things.
understand the process, the core process. too,
Exactly,
right? And not everybody does.
And know the players. I mean, I know I would never be able to sit on a jury in Fredericton because I know every prosecutor, every defense lawyer, every judge, every stenographer,
Police
every
officer.
I'm So I'm just
that's
know
an
everybody
advantage.
too well. So, but you hear things from those people.
Right.
It's like you might want to be in court
Be
tomorrow.
around
so.
tomorrow.
Relationships.
Exactly.
Well, I used to be a reporter, not a specialized in court reporter, but in radio we had to do a lot of 5 different things in one day, and court was one of those things. And but some of the you weren't there at the time. I was only a reporter until about 2004. But Kathy Metcalf and those those senior ones would take me and show me around. But they knew all the people, but I wouldn't have been there as often as you are. So you don't really, and that's a disadvantage. So the experienced ones, the ones that are there every day, well, that's where you get the scoops and you get the knowledge of those stories.
That's one of the things with shrinking newsrooms in the 21st century is that with fewer people beat reporting becomes less feasible.
Right.
And beat reporting, I think, is very valuable. That's why I'm able to get some of the stories I'm able to get. We do have some strong local beat reporters. The legislature beat's an important beat, and there's people working that beat for the Gleaner, the CBC, Global, and other media that are they're getting great stories, and they're reporting important news. Yeah. People ask me, "Oh, why aren't you doing something on Policy 713? Why aren't you doing something on travel nurses?" Like, I don't have time, and it's being covered.
Right.
It's that information is available out
right,
there, and. People say, "Oh, it must be intimidating trying to compete." I'm not trying to compete.
No, you have the market.
I see the Independent as part of a tapestry.
Right.
We're all, especially in New Brunswick, I find, the news community very much works together.
Yeah.
It's not as competitive as you might see in a much larger market, and you know, we share information sometimes, and I'm more than happy to give a younger reporter who's not familiar with course, you know, I'll talk you through it. I'll tell you. And I'll tell you how to spell that person's name and things like that. It's working together a lot of the time too.
I see that from my side of the camera, scrumming all the time. You see the camaraderie between the outlets and stuff, and kind of looking out for one another. And it's like the press gallery group, at least. You know, you see them. You see them working, doing their thing. That's all right. So spit it out.
What percentage? I'll get a question in here because no, but
Yeah, you get your
No, but I was going to say, what drives you? What connects you to court?
Yeah, that's a
Kind
good
of
question.
like
Good question, Joe.
No, good job.
Good work.
I
Yes.
I got hooked on court reporting back when I started in journalism. I got an undergrad degree at St. FX, and then I got a journalism diploma at Holland College in 93, 94. And then I interned at the Moncton Times and Transcript in 94. And during that summer, after a month or two, they said, "Why don't you shadow Jim Foster," was the court reporter in Moncton then. And he was the court reporter for a long time. And so I shadowed him for a few weeks, and I found it fascinating. It was great. And they said, "Okay, you do it for a couple of months." And they just let me do it on my own for a couple of months, and I was like transfixed. I loved it, found it very interesting. And then I actually, a lot of people don't realize this, then I worked in government for 3 years.
Oh.
Supplying services, remember that department?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but
And did comms there, and then got back into journalism. I was up in the Miramichi.
you
for
met
the
all
Moncton
your
paper.
targets at supplying services in comms and decided, well, that's the end of no more goals here.
I found work, that 3 years was fast. Like, I learned how government works.
Right.
And anytime people start going on about government conspiracies, they go, there's no
You're
government
giving us too
conspiracies.
much credit.
Government barely functions in spite of itself sometimes, but there's no secrets. But
No.
But I found it really interesting, and but I always loved journalism, and I got back into it. And then I ended up on staff at the Gleaner in 2001, and I had the background in court reporting. And after a little more than a year, they did a shake-up of the beats, and I took over the court beat from Richard Duplain. You guys
Yes, we
remember
know
Richard
Rick, yeah.
Duplain? Richard's not working; he's retired, but he's still around. And then I did that from September 2002 on until I left the paper. But it's a small it was always a small newsroom, so you're always doing other jobs as well.
Yeah.
I was filling in as an editor. I wrote the editorials for 2 or 3 months and things like that, and I enjoyed that. I love to write, period, but court's where my interest really lies.
Well, you cover the stories that no one else is covering, really, I don't think. And when you read your stories, you get not just a snippet either. You kind of get an explanation of where things have been, what the next steps are, and I find sometimes you have to respond to people about the process of court, the criminal situation, because it's very emotional, as you know.
Absolutely.
And people aren't necessarily happy with the sentence that's being given. They say, look, judges, you always see a lot of criticism, but you're often trying to explain a little bit sometimes.
The thing is, judges can't just impose whatever sentence they want. I mean, people's idea of the courts comes from American pop culture for a lot. And American pop culture is going to give you the ending you want or the outrage you want. And when I started The Independent, one of the philosophies I wanted to undertake was to give greater detail about the law. And then in responding to comments, whether it's on social media or on the site itself, part of what I'm doing is ensuring protecting myself in terms of liability. If people are saying, "Oh, this guy, hang him from, the highest yard arm," well, first of all, he's just charged.
Right.
Yeah.
I always remind
You
he's
do
just
always say-
charged.
yeah,
the
you always say
innocent
that.
until proven guilty, and that's important.
Yeah.
And I've covered cases where at the end it was like, that guy didn't. I don't think he did that, and that's the way that's the system working the way it's supposed to. But and then some people just don't understand that, there's the way things are set out. Youth criminal justice, things like that. So I've got more than 20 years of experience with it, so I'll take the time to maybe explain it.
And that's the difference from having social media that obviously you didn't have even hardly 10 years ago. And prior, you didn't have to do that. The story was in the paper, and I guess you might have taken the odd phone call, but you didn't have that sort of live 24/7 social media responsibility.
Which is both beneficial and terrible.
Yeah.
It all depends on how it's used. It's certainly become a very powerful tool for journalists in terms of finding stories, finding voices, getting tips, but it also turns every journalist into potentially a 24-hour news cycle chaser, and you just can't do that. You have to disconnect from times. Now, since I'm doing my own thing, I probably don't disconnect as much as I should.
Right.
I'm hitting the RCMP website and refreshing for a new news release. Is there anything out there? But eventually, it's like, I'm going to enjoy this movie, or I'm going to do this. And it's like, time to just disconnect.
Yeah.
I can't cover everything, and I learned that early on. There's no point in even trying. If you have the time, pursue it. And if you miss a story, well, I missed the story. You can't. No one can cover everything. There's no way to do it.
What percentage of your stories that you cover on the Fredericton Independent would be on there that's not on any other news platform?
Percentage?
Would it be like half of them, 3/4?
I would maybe 2/3.
Yeah.
I mean, the stories I'm publishing right now that I make free to everyone are things that you're going to see on other media, like an RCMP announcement about some sort of charges being laid or things like that, a weather alert, a city police news release or city hall news release. And if I'm not doing any work other than rewriting it, something like that, I just put it out there for free.
Yeah.
If I've done something that I had to be there and I had to do the work or I had to make the calls, then those are the stories that I charge for. I'd say at least half of what I'm publishing you can't read anywhere else, or you won't read. I'll have it first, and maybe other media outlets might pursue it afterwards if it's big enough. But day to day, most of the stuff I have you're not going to see somewhere else. And not all of them are huge, important stories, but they're important stories to some people.
And to the people,
And it's, I'm also trying to give a glimpse into how the system works and the challenges it faces. And I mean, sometimes you might see a story I publish about a defendant who was outrageous and abusive and profane, and I don't hold anything back.
No, you don't.
But some people might think at first glance, oh, he's just being sensationalist. It's not that big a story, but I think that gives a sense of what the system has to deal with, and that person who's losing it as a defendant is a victim of their own circumstances as well. There's a reason they can't control themselves. I'm not trying to embarrass them. I'm not trying to turn them into a monster. I'm just trying to say, this is what's going on.
This is what the scene is.
And there are reasons for it. So.
Well, you've seen probably repeat visitors to the court as not just lawyers and Crown prosecutors, but you've seen accused, and
I've gone a full generation actually.
oh my gosh,
I remember years ago, early on, covering a youth case, and it was
oh my God,
a
you
nasty
really are
case,
old.
and their kids are now going through,
Yeah.
and that's sad and it's tragic, but there's reasons for that, and the system is doing the best it can to address those reasons. I mean, you guys have been or are politicians. You've seen it firsthand that a lot of the issues in the criminal justice system aren't just criminal issues. They're healthcare issues.
There's underlying.
They're mental health. There's poverty issues. So there are reasons for all these things. Justice still has to be done. There still has to be deterrence. There still has to be denunciation. The system tries the best it can to also get people the help they need.
Do you think that the courts are too lenient on the accused? I mean, there's often a lot of comments and I know there's a reason why, but do you think they're too weak? Or
I don't see it that way at all, because I think having been covering the courts for so long, more than 2 decades, I appreciate the the legal reasoning that goes into it. Sometimes there's cases that surprise me. It's like, oh, that seems a little on the light side. But in general, I don't perceive it that way, because you can't. The other thing is, just hammering somebody with a hefty prison, that doesn't solve the problem. Capital punishment, we know that doesn't work. We know that it doesn't deter people from killing. It can possibly even inspire them to, because they don't want witnesses, because they might get the death penalty. Obviously not in Canada, but in parts of the States. So harsher sentences don't necessarily result in less crime. The other thing is people perceive things getting worse in terms of crime, and because of the statistics, but those statistics can be a positive thing. Sexual crimes and prosecutions are on the rise, but that's because people are more willing to come forward. Police forces are more willing to pursue and investigate. Prosecutors are more willing to approve charges. And the technology has improved in terms of investigation. So the fact that there's more of that being prosecuted can be a positive thing.
I have noticed, and that's what I've noticed lately over the last course of at least a few months, is the number of sexual assault cases that you've reported on becoming increasing more and more, and that kind of does explain part of it.
I don't know that there's more being prosecuted. I am reporting more, but that's because I'm choosing the stories. I'm writing more stories now than I would have when I was at the Gleaner, because there's only so much space in the newsroom and the paper. Sure. Whereas I can, if I'm sitting there waiting for another story and I hear something's like, I start taking notes, and I can choose to publish it right away, or I'll bank it for a day or two. But I don't think there's more sexual crimes happening in my perspective. There's perhaps more going through the courts.
That's what, no, I acknowledge that.
I think the biggest concern, and I know this is a number of judges are concerned about this, impaired driving is not going down. No. It's amazing after so many decades and everybody acknowledging
it will if we don't
it's a plague on society. It's still happening, even with all the awareness that's out there.
Well, and the penalties too. The penalties are
pretty stiff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends on your circumstances. If you live out in Stanley and you lose your driver's license, that's a big deal. That's got a sting to it. If you live in downtown Fredericton and you have a bus pass, maybe it doesn't have as much sting. But I think for a lot of people, the social stigma of people finding out that you did something like that is a bigger penalty than the fine.
Right.
And a $1,000, $2,000 fine for some people is no big deal, and for other people, it could tear their lives apart. Could absolutely mean the difference between making rent or having a warrant out or something like that. So it all depends. But it doesn't appear that the increasing penalties have curbed it at all. I'm not sure why.
That's very interesting.
It is.
Observation.
A couple other questions. So any memories back over the years that you kind of
significant events that
Jack jumps
out at you.
There's a lot of
will
ugly
be.
things.
I suppose because you're seeing really
but there's also
sort of
some silly things too. I mean, one of my favorite stories I ever wrote when I was at the Gleaner, and I can't remember the exact year. It was a little shoplifting story. It was nothing. It was a nothing crimes. This guy had stolen a box of hair restorer at the superstore. Not because he wanted to use it, but because he bought it before and it didn't work and he wanted to get his money back, but he'd thrown the packaging out. Well, the judge had a laugh over it, and everyone, the defendant, the Crown, the defense, judge, were all laughing. It was silly. And it wasn't a serious crime at all.
Yeah.
But it just struck me funny, and I wrote up the story, and my editor, the page one editor at the Gleaner at the time, loved it. And I don't know how this happened. It would never happen anymore. It was the dominant headline on page one on a Friday because I had suggested the headline, "Hair Today, Gone Tomorrow." And it was just a silly story. But I mean, and even court news can have its lighter side.
Moments.
Yeah.
Well, there.
So how many subscribers do you have now?
I have total subscribers just shy of 4,000.
Okay.
I have well over 300 paid subscribers. And most of those are signed up on the annual rate of $90 a year. There's also a monthly rate of $9. And it's going well. I even see when I put out a free story, people will find it, and that will spark them to sign up to take a look. They see the other stuff, and they might on the site or on the Substack app, and they might try and read it. Oh, it's paid. Well, I find this interesting, and they'll give it a shot. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased. One downside was throughout last year when I was publishing for everything for free, I was getting a lot of traffic from Facebook because that Canadian news ban that Facebook put in what didn't capture me. I was under the radar
on that.
Okay.
And so that was the only local news that could be shared link-wise on Facebook, and I benefited from that. It was great. And then about a week or two after I went subscription, and I don't know if those coincide or if they just happened to realize that I was a news site, I got captured by that ban as well, and it has made it more challenging. So now I share images that Substack allows me to create, and then post not a link, but the shortcut web address for the site in general. But and people can't get to my stuff as easily anymore. But that's that's okay.
Yeah, that's just like you said, a roadblock. Hopefully that can get changed to allow local news.
Well,
on
as I understand it, something similar was done in Australia, and Facebook resisted, but eventually they caved on it. So we'll see what happens. Google came around and cooperated, so we'll see what happens. I know a lot of people on Facebook really do miss being able to share news links. And in terms of people, well, why should Facebook pay for Canadian news and things like that? And I didn't fully understand it when the legislation was introduced, but now I managed to get my head wrapped around it. It's Bell satellite TV or Rogers. Channels want to be on there, and they have to pay, or Rogers has to pay the channel, or Bell, the carriers have to pay the various TV stations, whatever, to be part of their packages, and that's how they make money. Well, Facebook is about sharing stories, sharing information. Canadian news content is some of that information, and that's what people want to read about. And Facebook benefits from added traffic and added commentary and things like that. And those news stories tell Facebook what their readers are interested in, which they use to sell advertising. So we'll see what happens with that, but if it doesn't come around, that's okay.
So,
There's others.
so who is this all benefiting? Is it the big Rogers and Bell that they're trying to avoid this going on?
Well, I think what they're saying is that
Legislation's not
Facebook
benefiting anybody.
if Facebook is going to profit off of journalists. Journalists should get that revenue. And so right now, journalists, CTV, Rogers, Don MacPherson, they don't get that revenue, even though Facebook was profiting off of that. And so the Canadian government said, no, we don't. If you're going to carry these, Facebook should be paying. And I think that was the gist of it.
Basically. I mean, the companies like Facebook and eBay and Kijiji basically decimated the advertising model for news, especially newspapers. And that's the way that's the new reality. So I think the federal government was trying to deal with that and recognizing that news content is important to a democracy, and was endeavoring to find a way to channel private sector funds from these giant corporations that are benefiting from this stuff back into news ventures. Obviously, it didn't work out the way they're hoping to. I don't know if it's ultimately a good idea or a bad idea. I think it's good that it's being addressed and at least acknowledged that this is something we need to ensure happens. And that brings me back to a point about, well, I've got this paywall now. People aren't thrilled with the paywall. They want to see the stuff. And I get that. But I have to be able to make a living doing this. I can't afford to do it. I was able to do it last year for free because I had a different source of revenue or income. Now I don't. So this has to provide it. And if it works out, that's awesome. If it doesn't, that's okay. I can find something else. But it can't be free.
No.
It can't. I mean, news, professional news, it has to be paid for. But the industry is partly to blame because for years we put everything up on the web for free, because the advertising model was still working. And people think CBC is free. It's not. Everyone pays for that. So if you're getting news, you are paying for it.
We all pay.
But it may be invisible.
What do you think about the people that get really upset and angry when they hit a paywall? Like, not just with yours, but I mean, anywheres.
But they don't. It just depends on the paywall. No one gets upset that Netflix wants money.
No.
I am technically in the same business as Netflix.
That's right.
I have content. I charge a fee for you to access that content. The nature of the content and the purpose of the content is very different, but it's content all the same. It's something that people are going to, I think, learn gradually and come to accept. People think TV news is free, but it isn't, because you're paying for your cable or your satellite or your digital TV. You are paying for it. It's just, you don't think about it. My model, you have to pay for. And it's the same as the newspaper model. People had to pay. Either you picked up off the newsstand or you had a subscription.
Get your news.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were doing it before. Now it's a little more specialized. And this could be the way local news gets delivered. It could be you have a niche site like this and you're picking the ones you want to fulfill your needs. You have a political site or you have a court thing. Maybe that's how things will evolve. I don't know.
A bundle or something
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that. That's a neat idea too.
Yeah.
There's a question from one of our, I forget what you want to call them, a champion viewer. Ambassador. Jeff Ferguson. How can we reach Don if we have press releases that they want you to consider?
My email is all over the site, on the free stories as well. It's ftonindependent@gmail.com. That's your best way.
Yeah, FTON.
ftonindependent@gmail.com.
Okay.
In stereo.
And that's the best way to get a hold of me. So
And that's on your website as well.
that's on my
Fredericton
that's on the website. I believe the email address is on the Facebook page, which is blank because Facebook wiped all the content off of it.
they really?
But it's still there.
Right.
So, and I think the email is listed there. So
I'm glad you went into more detail about that legislation and who it affects and why. And
I'm not really an expert on it, but that's
no, but it's you simplified it enough.
it's
And because I personally know my constituents, now that we can't share news articles and things like that on Facebook, I've noticed. I guess a decrease in the knowledge that people in engagement, but if they're not reading it on Facebook, not everybody buys the Gleaner or the TJ, not everybody's watching CBC or that website. It seems like their knowledge of certain issues and stories around it isn't like it was in the past. So it's something that I've noticed.
Well, yeah, we'll have to have maybe Vicky Hogarth on the show, CHCO-TV. Everyone's familiar.
She was one of our
Vicky.
first guests.
Yes, and she's been a champion on this issue.
Yeah.
So she'd be a good one to have on there to talk about that.
Just
just
in terms of the champion and around how problematic it is.
Yeah, how it affects local news, how it affects CHCO on Facebook, and sharing news content and things like that. So, yeah.
I mean, you're still able to share it on things like X or Twitter. I still think of it as Twitter.
Yeah.
Well, there was a time when we could copy and paste a TJ article on Facebook.
But
get away with it.
You wouldn't always get away with it. Somebody would make a call and say, you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But you could, but now you can't even do any of that business.
Well, no, you can. Well, the screenshots are up there. Copying the text and pasting it, people get away with that, and it's unfortunate. I mean, I've tried to battle that on Facebook before. It really befuddled me, because especially when it was all free and you could share my links. Like literally, you just have to put the link there. I need the traffic. I need people to be aware. But I kind of get it, but at the same time, is if you keep doing that and I don't have the subscription base, my site goes away, but all that information is gone too. No one else is doing it.
Right.
So if that's important to you, at least share the link. But
I don't see. I would rarely see any of my colleagues doing any of that now. It's just we just put our own content on. There was one, Mary did share some kind of an article, copied and pasted, but it was about when we opened the nursing home, I guess. But it wasn't your content.
No, I know.
TJ thing,
and that's the other thing that news faces in the
People were sharing it for
21st
free,
century.
so non-subscribers could access this is what they're the whole. Okay, so we're getting around the like free cable.
Copy
or something
paste.
that-
Social media and the web have empowered everyone
Now I
to
get
share their stories, to share their news. Government uses news releases, uses
All the
social
time.
media to get their message out the way they want to frame their message. That's acceptable and that's fine. I think the importance of independent journalism and I don't mean just someone like me, but I mean also Brunswick News and Post Media and CBC and CTV and Global, is that it's important to have those sets of eyes to filter it, to give other perspectives, to vet it. Sometimes the announcement, that's fine. It's innocuous. It's an important thing to share. And sometimes maybe it needs to have a little challenge, a little pushback, or at least someone seeking out a different perspective on it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I think it's quite something that you're basically trying to save local news, in my opinion, because you could have taken a different route and
Just trying to pay my mortgage, but have fun doing it.
so important. Superhero costume.
There's something bigger here going on.
When I get your emails, when you release a story each day, the first thing I go to look is to see if any of those people you're writing
See if
about
your
live
name
near
is
me.
in there.
Well, no, not my name, no. But that's a funny one.
Constituents.
But that's what I do, and I watch that, and I think lots of people do, or we watch. So I don't go to the courtroom every day. I don't have time, and probably be frowned upon for politicians to sit there all the time. I don't know. Maybe there's an unwritten rule about that. But to be able to follow what you're writing on certain stories or certain court cases is important to me. I think there's a niche there, and you're right.
Absolutely.
And so, you're just going to let it ride for now and see how it rolls? And
I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and try and give people some other stuff too. The part of the problem with just covering court is that, I jokingly sometimes call it the parade of misery. It's, it can be pretty dark, but so I'm trying to get other things in there, and occasionally I'll get a feature, or I'll do, I did a couple of pieces on the Liverpool Street exit story the past week, and make it a little broader, but at its heart, it focuses on courts and justice issues. But on going to court, I think everybody should spend a week in provincial court.
Yeah.
as just a viewer.
Just to see a side of the community that you might not. Fredericton and the surrounding communities, a fairly affluent town, and in a lot of ways, the more tragic side of the community can be hidden, and I think you can see that a little more clearly there. At the same time, we shouldn't think that it's a Wild West and there's all these terrible things happening every day to everybody. It's not. It's a minority. It's a small corners of the community, darker corners, but it's there. And I think you need to be able to see these people, not as merely defendants in the system, things like that.
Well, and then as you touched on, the social side of society that's in the courts, whether it's addiction, mental health, what have you. But addiction, we know that, by and large, people have an addiction issue, not necessarily a criminal issue, but it's those root of those addiction concerns that you'll see in court, and that's basically a fabric of our society right there. And I think that is a good thing to say, is that people should be in court, experience it, to see what families are going through.
And addiction is more often than not. Addiction is more often than not a symptom of something else, of a past trauma.
Right.
Or in even the crimes that they commit themselves is a symptom of the past trauma. It can be part of a cycle that's, happening all over again. So,
is Fredericton going to get a new courthouse? Is it going to open? Are you going to be there?
Caucus.
Well,
I think it's eventually it's going to happen.
It's moving along now.
Do we see some movement there?
And should we do a request to have a special office space for?
I think that would be great, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, they're already thinking that it's going to be too small as it is. As the population
I wouldn't
continues
be
to grow, right?
surprised.
Well, you know how we build our schools. We build them for the needs at the time in the hospitals.
And
And actually, as a matter of fact, when recently at committee, the questions were asked, like, what planning did you put into building the courthouse? And they just said, well, we don't plan for what you might have in 5 years or 10, because you don't know.
Well, especially when it was supposed to be built 5 years ago, right?
Well, exactly.
So they're already
it was.
behind the projections.
Even just the costs
Well,
over 1 year.
nobody
It's
knew our
just waste.
population was going to grow by 80,000 people 5
Yeah.
years ago either. So now here we
Good
are.
point.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be perfect if we didn't need a courthouse? That there was
Because you
never
wouldn't
any
be-
rules?
you
Well,
about
then
smoking?
I have to find some other way to.
Oh, you find another way. I know.
No,
But
it really, it would be nice if the need went reduced, it went down. The other thing is that we have to realize that the Burton Courthouse is going to close when this new one is
It is,
completed. And all of the functions are going to be in that one building. I don't know if all of the related services are going to be. I suspect they won't, which is unfortunate because it'd be better if you had probation services in the building, if you had victim services in the building.
Right.
Because then it becomes, the people who have to come to court invariably have to go see those
Right.
those services as
Yeah,
well.
If they're right there in the
And,
building and they're going to get the service,
Yeah.
or they're going to go
Yeah.
see it, seek it.
Well,
Well, we got to wrap up, Don.
do.
Anything you'd like to-
I was wondering that because it feels like we've been talking for 2 hours.
No, it's been great, but anything you'd like to say as a parting word?
Well, you can find the Fredericton Independent at fton.news. That's a shortcut, not the actual web address, but it'll work for most people in browsers. It won't work in the government browsers because it's part of an intranet.
conspiracy.
But no, not at all. It's just because it's an intranet as well. Or ftonindependent.substack.com, or just search Fredericton Independent and Don MacPherson. You'll find me.
yeah. Well, you're the best, Don. We really appreciate you coming on.
I
You've been
appreciate
good to
it.
work with over the years in our roles, but yeah, you're doing great for local news too. So
Well, I enjoy what I do, so that enables me to do it well, I think, and I'm glad people are responding to it. I hope they'll continue to support it, and I hope more people are hearing about it through this. So.
Awesome.
Good.
Well,
That's the goal. Local news.
Look up the Fredericton Independent and pay your subscription. It's only $90 a year to get local news. So
Or $9 a month
Or
if you just want
$9
to try it out.
that's right.
$9.
$9 a month, 90 a year. So
Great.
Okay.
Well, thanks, guys.
Good.
Good to see you again.
good seeing you. Good
Good to
seeing
see
you,
us all
Don.
Thank you
together.
very
There's
much.
Comments saying great to see the three
Great.
brothers back together
Yeah,
again.
That's
So.
good.
Okay.
And we want to thank our viewers and have a good night.
At CHCO.
Yes.